Today's gospel is a continuation from yesterday's scolding that Jesus gives to the Pharisees for not being authentic, because they weren't being authentic. They would honor God with their lips, in their prayers and in their teachings, but in their heart, Jesus said they were very far from godly things and virtuous people. Externally, they went through the motions, so to speak, but internally, he was saying they were rotten. We continue to explore this theme of purity of heart today as Jesus tells the Pharisees to give their heads a shake. He says, give your heads a shake if that's what you think. If you think that you're fooling anybody, if you think you're fooling God. Because at the time, their hang-up, the Pharisees' hang-up, was on the ritual washing of hands, the washing of dishes, and the proper preparation of their food. Jesus tells them that it's ridiculous to think that evil enters into a person's body by unclean food, or dirty hands, or unwashed bowls. Rather, Jesus tells them that evil comes from within. Evil comes from within. It is the intentions of the human heart and their thoughts that lead ultimately to evil actions. Jesus gives examples of theft, fornication, murder, adultery, wickedness, deceit, envy, slander or gossip, greed, and pride. All these sinful actions originate from the human heart. They come from within. Think about how we try people in the legal system today. We always want to know what was their intent, what was their motive. Was there an intent to kill, or was this an accident? Was it self-defense? There's a big difference in culpability even today between a planned homicide or murder and involuntary manslaughter, like in a car accident. What does this tell us? It tells us that we must purify our hearts if we are to change our actions. We need to purify our hearts if our actions are going to change going forward. It means that what we desire impacts how we behave. It means that our thoughts, our fantasies, our imagination can lead to lived out sin. In fact, they may form our hearts to be disordered towards sinful behaviors if we spend excess time reflecting on sinful things. If we do this, we're more likely to act on these thoughts. What are the implications of this insight? It means what we watch on TV, for example, it matters because it fills our minds and our thoughts with images, with stories that will influence our imagination, our desires, and our idle thoughts. For example, there's a series of movies that have been out. It's very popular. It's called Fast and Furious. It's ultimately, if you've never heard about it, about glamorizing street racing. These movies are very basic, a horrible storyline, but it's ultimately these people that race cars to win the approval and the affection of their friends. That's ultimately, there you go, you've seen all the movies already. It's been proven in statistics through psychologists and looking at surveys of police departments that in the weeks following the release of any of these 8 movies, so in the days and the weeks following these release of street racing movies that encourages this, that normalizes this, that glamorizes street racing, that following the release of these movies, the number of cars speeding on regular residential streets goes through the roof. The number of people stopped for going over 30 kilometers an hour above the speed limit is astronomical in the first few days after these movies have been released. It's directly tied to the thoughts and fantasies that come from immersing our mind, immersing our heart with these types of images and stories. People watch these street racing movies and they think it's okay. They think it's cool. They think it's glamorizing by Hollywood all these experiences, that nobody can get hurt, that there's no casualties, that there's no consequences. All of a sudden they think that their Honda Civic and their minivan is a race car. This applies also to the over-sexualized society that we live in, to the violence that we witness on so many programs and movies as well. This behavior that we are subjected to, that we fill our minds with, that ultimately enter into our hearts. By watching these programs, we fill our thoughts and our hearts with these images and stories to the point of saturation, that it becomes normal, that this is just how it's supposed to be. In a way, we're training ourselves to think that this is normal. We fill our hearts to think that violence or inappropriate sexual behavior is actually normal. It's okay. Everyone else is doing it. It must be okay. Jesus tells us today that it is from within the human heart, in our thoughts, in our minds, our very being, our soul, that evil intentions come. But the soul is not evil, but it's rather what we have filled our heart and mind and soul with that come out through actions that are sinful. But the good news is that this process is reversible. It's curable. There is a cure to this. We do this by filling our thoughts, our minds, our hearts, our souls with virtuous things, with godly things, with holy things. By reading maybe virtuous stories of heroic virtue, maybe the lives of the saints or today's modern saints that live among us, listening to our stories of faith, of love, of service, of charity. We fill our hearts with pure desires by spending time with God in prayer. After Mass, there will be that opportunity in adoration in our chapel. We normalize good behaviors by living good and virtuous lives ourselves. This way we are examples for ourselves as a reminder, but also to everyone who sees us and knows us and encounters us, that holiness is not only possible, but it can be the norm as well. By having good friendships, we receive the support we need to stay on the right path. We see it modeled in our friends and our families. And ultimately, that elevates our imagination. It elevates our thinking. It elevates our idle thoughts to what is inspiring. Our dreams become focused on what is possible and how we can make a difference in our world and share the faith with those around us. That is what we were made for, and that is the fruits that come from a pure heart. May God bless you.